I stood in the doorway of my corner office watching security escort my father, mother, and sister through the marble lobby of the building I now partially owned. My father's face was crimson with rage, my mother clutched her designer purse like a lifeline, and Olivia, my younger sister, kept looking back at me with a mixture of shock and fury. The receptionist's eyes were wide as she watched the scene unfold. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I simply watched as the automatic glass doors closed behind them, severing the final thread that had once bound me to the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. But before I tell you how I got here, before I walk you through every painful step that transformed me from victim to victor, I need to know I'm not alone in this. If you've ever been the family scapegoat, the one who gave everything and got nothing back, do me a favor and hit that like button right now. Not for me, but for every person out there who thinks they're crazy for wanting to be treated like a human being by their own blood. Subscribe because these stories, these real stories about breaking free from toxicity, they need to be told. They need to be heard. And here's what I really want to know. Drop it in the comments. When did you realize that blood doesn't always mean family? Was there a specific moment when something inside you just snapped? Because for me, that moment changed everything. Now let me take you back 3 years back to when I still believed that love meant sacrifice, back to the night that destroyed me and rebuilt me all at once. 3 years ago, I was a completely different person. My name is Amelia Richardson, and back then I was 32 years old, working as a mid-level analyst at an investment firm in downtown Seattle. I lived with my parents, Richard and Carol Richardson, in their sprawling house in Bellevue, along with my 5-year-old son Leo and my younger sister Olivia. To anyone looking from the outside, we probably seemed like the perfect upper-middle-class family. My father was a semi-retired executive. My mother had been a stay-at-home mom who now spent her days volunteering at charity events. And Olivia was the golden child, a social media influencer with a growing following and a talent for always being the center of attention. But inside that beautiful house with its manicured lawns and designer furniture, I was drowning. I had moved back home after my divorce 2 years earlier, thinking it would be temporary, just until I got back on my feet. My ex-husband had left me with nothing but debt and a traumatized little boy who had nightmares about his parents fighting. I thought my family would support me, help me rebuild. Instead, I found myself trapped in a nightmare that made my failed marriage look like a fairy tale. From the moment I moved back in, the rules were clear. I was expected to contribute financially, of course. My parents took almost 60% of my paycheck for rent and utilities, even though I only occupied one small bedroom that I shared with Leo. But the financial exploitation was just the beginning. I was also expected to be the family maid, cook, babysitter, and emotional punching bag. I cooked dinner every night after coming home from a 10-hour workday. I cleaned the entire house every weekend. I did everyone's laundry, including Olivia's, who was 28 and perfectly capable of doing it herself. And through it all, I told myself I was being a good daughter, a good sister. I told myself this was temporary, that I was paying my dues, that eventually things would get better. My parents constantly reminded me how lucky I was that they took me in after my failure of a marriage. They told me I should be grateful that not every family would be so generous. So I swallowed my pride, ignored the knot of resentment growing in my chest, and kept my head down. Olivia, meanwhile, did nothing. She would sleep until noon, spend her afternoons taking photos for her Instagram and her evenings going out with friends. She contributed nothing to the household financially or otherwise. When I gently suggested to my mother that maybe Olivia could help with some chores, Carol looked at me like I had suggested burning down the house. "Olivia is building her career," she said. "She needs to focus on her brand. You had your chance and you blew it with that disaster of a marriage. The least you can do is support your sister who actually has potential." Those words stung more than I wanted to admit. But I pushed the pain down, added it to the growing collection of hurts I was storing in my heart, and kept going. I had Leo to think about. My sweet, sensitive little boy who deserved stability and a roof over his head. I could endure anything for him, I told myself. I was strong enough. Then 6 months before that bathroom incident, everything changed. Olivia started feeling tired all the time. She lost weight rapidly, her skin took on a grayish pallor, and she had constant headaches. After weeks of tests and specialists, the diagnosis came back like a thunderbolt: acute lymphoblastic leukemia. The doctor said she would need aggressive chemotherapy, possibly a bone marrow transplant. The prognosis was uncertain but hopeful if she received treatment immediately. My parents were devastated. I watched my father, usually so stoic and controlling, break down and sob in the hospital waiting room. My mother became a shell of herself, barely eating, barely sleeping. And me, I immediately offered to get tested as a potential bone marrow donor. I organized their medical files, researched treatment centers, took time off work to drive Olivia to appointments when my parents were too emotionally wrought to function. I set up a meal train, created a GoFundMe page, did everything I could to help. I won't lie and say I didn't have complicated feelings. Olivia and I had never been close. She had always been the favorite, the pretty one, the talented one, while I was the responsible one, the boring one, the one who existed to make everyone else's life easier. But she was still my sister, and she was sick, and I wanted her to survive. Whatever resentment I felt was buried under genuine concern for her well-being. The chemotherapy started, and it was brutal. Olivia lost her beautiful long blonde hair, the hair she had always been so proud of, the hair that featured in countless Instagram posts. She was devastated. My mother was devastated. My father was devastated. And somehow, in the twisted logic of my family, this became about me. It started small. Comments about how I should spend more time with Olivia instead of working so much. Suggestions that I should give more of my paycheck to help with medical bills that insurance didn't cover. Implications that if I really loved my sister, I would be doing more sacrificing, more proving my devotion more visibly. Then came the hair conversation. It was a Sunday evening about 3 months into Olivia's treatment. I had just finished cooking dinner, a full spread of roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and vegetables, trying to tempt Olivia's fading appetite. She barely touched her food, just pushed it around her plate, tears streaming down her face. She kept touching her head, now covered with a silk scarf, and sobbing about how ugly she felt, how she couldn't stand to look at herself. My mother rushed to comfort her, shooting me a look that somehow conveyed that this was my fault for not being supportive enough. My father sat in stony silence, his jaw clenched. And then Olivia looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen, and said, "It's not fair. Why does Amelia get to have beautiful long hair when I have nothing? Why does she get to be pretty while I'm going through this?" The room went silent. I felt my stomach drop. My hair was just hair. It was brown, straight, nothing special. I usually wore it in a simple ponytail for work. But in that moment, it became a symbol of everything that was wrong, everything that was unfair about Olivia's situation. My mother spoke first. "You know, Amelia, it really isn't fair. Olivia is going through such a traumatic experience, and you're walking around flaunting your health and your appearance. It's insensitive." I remember feeling confused, trying to process what was happening. "I'm not flaunting anything," I said quietly. "I'm just existing." My father's voice cut through the air like a knife. "Your sister is fighting for her life. The least you could do is show some solidarity, some sacrifice." I looked between them, my heart starting to race. "What are you asking me to do?" My mother's face softened into what she probably thought was a compassionate expression, but I could see the steel beneath it. "It would mean so much to Olivia if you shaved your head, to show her she's not alone, to prove that you really care." "You want me to shave my head?" "It's just hair," my father said, his tone brooking no argument. "It grows back, but the message it would send to your sister, that you're willing to share in her burden, that would mean everything." I looked at Olivia, expecting her to protest, to tell them they were being ridiculous. But she just stared at me with those big, watery eyes, and I saw something there that made my blood run cold. She wanted this. She wanted to see me brought down to her level, wanted to see me lose something too. But I said no. I said I was sorry for what she was going through, that I would do anything practical to help, but my hair was my own, and I needed it for my professional life, for my sense of self, for my own autonomy. The reaction was explosive. My father called me selfish. My mother cried and said she was ashamed to have raised such a heartless daughter. Olivia sobbed and ran to her room. And I sat there shaking, wondering how my refusal to mutilate my own appearance for symbolic purposes had become the ultimate betrayal. For weeks after that, the house was frigid. They stopped speaking to me except when necessary. My mother would sigh heavily whenever I walked into a room. My father would make pointed comments about people who only thought of themselves. Olivia stayed in her room, playing the victim, occasionally emerging to give me wounded looks. Even little Leo noticed the tension, asking me why everyone was mad at Nana and Papa's house. I started researching apartments, looking at my finances, trying to figure out if I could afford to move out. But between my parents taking most of my income and the cost of living in Seattle, the numbers just didn't work. I was trapped, and they knew it. Then came that day. That terrible, soul-crushing day that I will never forget as long as I live. It was a Saturday morning, about 2 weeks after the initial hair conversation. Olivia had just finished another round of chemo and was home resting. I had taken Leo to his soccer practice and come back to find an unusual atmosphere in the house. My parents and Olivia were all in the living room, and they looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Your father and I have been talking, my mother said, her voice artificially sweet. We think it's time for a family meeting. Leo is at your friend Maya's house, correct? No, I said, confused. He's upstairs playing in our room. Oh, well, maybe Carol can take him to the park for a bit, my father said. This is adult conversation. Before I could protest, my mother had already gone upstairs. I heard her voice cheerful and grandmotherly, telling Leo that she was going to take him for ice cream and to the park. Leo, thrilled at this unexpected treat from his usually cold grandmother, came bounding down the stairs. They left, and suddenly I was alone with my father and Olivia. Come upstairs, Amelia, my father said. We need to talk to you about something important. Every instinct in my body screamed danger, but I followed them up the stairs, down the hallway, and into the master bathroom. It was a huge space, all marble and chrome, with a walk-in shower and a separate soaking tub. The door clicked shut behind me, and I felt a wave of claustrophobia. That's when I saw it. Sitting on the pristine white countertop next to the sink was an electric hair clipper, the professional kind that barbers use. My heart started to pound. We've decided that you need to make this sacrifice, my father said, his voice calm and matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather. Olivia is suffering, and you've shown a complete lack of empathy. This ends now. I backed toward the door, but Olivia was already there, blocking it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Come on, Amelia, she said. It's just hair. You said it yourself. I felt panic rising in my throat. You can't force me to do this. This is insane. My father picked up the clippers, testing them. They buzzed to life with an angry whir. This is not a request, Amelia. This is what's going to happen. You're going to sit down and we're going to fix this situation. You're going to learn what sacrifice really means. I am an adult, I said, my voice shaking. I am 32 years old. You cannot do this. You're living under our roof, eating our food, and you have the audacity to refuse to help your dying sister, my mother's voice came from behind me. I spun around to see her standing in the doorway, having returned from dropping off Leo. Her face was hard, unforgiving. I tried to push past her, but my father grabbed my arm. His grip was iron, surprising in its strength. Sit down, Amelia. What happened next was like something out of a nightmare. My father forced me to stand in front of the mirror while my mother held my shoulders. I was sobbing, begging them to stop trying to explain that I had work on Monday, that I needed my hair for my professional image, that this was assault, that they couldn't do this. But they didn't care. My father grabbed a fistful of my hair, and I heard the buzz of the clippers as he pressed them against my scalp. The vibration of the clippers against my skull was unbearable. My hair fell in thick chunks, scattering across my shoulders and the white floor. Every time I tried to pull away, my mother's fingers dug deeper into my shoulders, holding me in place. Through my tears, I watched myself in the mirror, watched my identity being erased, one brutal stroke at a time. Olivia didn't just watch. She stood there with her phone out, recording the whole thing, a satisfied smirk on her face. This is beautiful, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Family solidarity. So touching. Maybe I'll post this, show everyone how supportive our family is. My father's voice in my ear was cold, mechanical. Olivia is fighting for her life. You don't have the right to be beautiful while she's suffering. This is the minimum sacrifice you can make. You're being selfish, ungrateful, and cruel. This is what happens when you put your vanity above family. My mother chimed in, her fingers digging into my shoulders. Stop being so dramatic, Amelia. This ugly hair suits your position in this house better anyway. You were never the pretty one. At least now you look the part. I don't know how long it took. It felt like hours, but was probably only 15 minutes. By the end, my head was completely shaved, the stubble rough under my trembling fingers when I dared to touch it. I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back. I looked like I had been through chemotherapy myself, which I suppose was the point. My eyes were red and swollen from crying, my face was blotchy, and my newly bare head looked alien and exposed. The family stood back, admiring their work like artists at a gallery. There, my father said, unplugging the clippers and cleaning them off. That wasn't so hard, was it? Now Olivia doesn't have to feel alone. I couldn't speak. My throat was raw from crying. I was shaking so violently that I had to grip the edge of the sink to stay upright. And then, in the most surreal moment of all, there was a pounding on the door. Grandma, Grandpa. The small voice of my son penetrated the bathroom door. Don't hurt Mommy. Please don't hurt Mommy. Leo had seen. Somehow he had seen what was happening. Maybe through a crack in the door, maybe he had snuck back into the house. But he had witnessed his mother being assaulted by his grandparents, and he was screaming. My mother rushed out, and I could hear her voice, saccharine sweet, coaxing Leo away. Mommy is doing something very special for Auntie Olivia, darling. She's being a good sister. You should be proud of her, not selfish like she usually is." But Leo kept crying, his voice growing more distant as my mother led him away. That sound, the sound of my child's distress caused by my own family, was the final crack in the dam. Something inside me broke, or maybe something finally mercifully died. That part of me that had always believed family was everything, that had always tried to be good enough, that had always sacrificed and compromised and bent myself into shapes that would make them love me, that part turned to ash. I looked at my father and Olivia through the mirror, and I saw them clearly for the first time in my life. They weren't family. They were my abusers. This wasn't love or tough love or family solidarity. This was torture. This was assault. This was them breaking me down because they could, because I had let them, because I had convinced myself that their treatment of me was somehow normal or deserved. That night, after they all went to bed satisfied with their day's work, I moved with a clarity I had never experienced before. I didn't think, I didn't second guess, I just acted. I went to Leo's room and gently woke him up. "We're going on an adventure, baby," I whispered. "We're going to Aunt Maya's house for a sleepover." Leo, still half asleep and traumatized from what he'd witnessed, just nodded and held my hand. I packed 2 bags, one for each of us, with just the essentials: clothes, toiletries, Leo's favorite stuffed bear, some books. I went to my room and found the small fireproof box where I kept my important documents. Birth certificates, social security cards, my passport, Leo's passport, the title to my car that I had somehow managed to keep in my own name. I grabbed the envelope with my emergency cash, about $2,000. I had been secretly saving by skimming small amounts from my groceries and other expenses. I took one last look at the room I had lived in for 2 years, the room where I had cried myself to sleep so many nights, where I had slowly lost myself piece by piece. I felt nothing. No nostalgia, no sadness, just a cold, determined numbness. I carried Leo to the car, buckled him into his booster seat, threw our bags in the trunk, and drove away from that house at 2 a.m. I didn't leave a note. I didn't send a text. I just left, and as I watched the house disappear in my rearview mirror, I felt the first tiny flutter of something that might have been hope. Maya's apartment was in Capitol Hill, a small 1-bedroom that she had decorated with colorful art and plants that seemed to thrive under her care. She opened the door in her pajamas, took one look at my shaved head and tear-stained face, and Leo's scared expression, and pulled us both inside without a word. She settled Leo on her couch with a blanket, and his bear turned on a gentle cartoon, and then led me to her tiny kitchen where she made me tea. I couldn't taste, and held my hand while I finally told her everything. Maya wasn't just my friend. She was a lawyer specializing in family law and domestic abuse cases. As I spoke, I watched her face transform from shocked to furious to coldly professional. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, and then she said, "Amelia, what they did to you isn't just wrong. It's assault. It's battery. And the fact that they did it in front of Leo, that they traumatized your child, that's child abuse. This isn't family being difficult. This is criminal behavior." The words hung in the air between us. I had known it was bad, but hearing it defined in legal terms made it real in a way that cut through the fog of denial I had been living in. "They violated your bodily autonomy," Maya continued. "They physically restrained you and forcibly altered your appearance against your will. That's assault and battery. If you want to press charges, I will help you. But whether you do that or not, you need to understand that you don't owe them anything. Not loyalty, not contact, not explanation. Nothing." I stayed with Maya for 2 weeks while I got my bearings. During that time, so many things happened so fast that it felt like I was living someone else's life. First, Maya helped me document everything. We took photos of my shaved head, of the emotional state Leo was in, and Maya wrote up a detailed account of the incident and my history with my family. She also helped me get a restraining order application. Started, though, I ultimately decided not to file it unless they tried to contact me. My family did try to contact me, of course. It started the morning after we left. My phone exploded with messages and calls. My father's messages were angry, demanding to know where I was and how dare I steal Leo away in the middle of the night. My mother's messages were manipulative, talking about how worried they were, how I was being irrational and emotional, how I needed to come home so we could talk about this like adults. Olivia's messages were the most revealing. She sent me the video of them shaving my head with a message that said, "This is what solidarity looks like. Maybe you should remember that before you abandon your family." I blocked all their numbers. I blocked them on every social media platform. I informed my workplace that under no circumstances were they to be allowed in the building or given any information about me. And then I focused on the 2 most important things in my life, healing and Leo. The day after we left, I had to go to work. I couldn't afford to lose my job, not when I was starting over with nothing. I borrowed a scarf from Maya and wrapped it around my head, trying to make it look intentional like a fashion choice. But my hands shook as I tied it, and I couldn't meet my own eyes in the mirror. At work, I went straight to my desk, hoping to avoid attention. But my boss, Sarah Chen, called me into her office within an hour. Sarah was a woman in her 50s, sharp and professional, someone I respected immensely but had always been slightly intimidated by. I assumed I was about to be reprimanded for my appearance or my distraction. Instead, Sarah closed the door behind me, gestured for me to sit, and said, "Amelia, I'm not going to ask you what happened, but I'm going to tell you something. This company has an employee assistance program that includes counseling services, legal consultation, and emergency financial assistance. If you need to take some personal time, you have it. If you need an advance on your salary, we can arrange it. Your work here has been consistently excellent, and you are a valuable asset to this firm. We take care of our assets." I burst into tears right there in her office, all the emotion I had been holding back flooding out. Sarah handed me a box of tissues and waited patiently until I could breathe again. "Thank you," I managed to say. "That means more than you know." Over the next few weeks, I took advantage of every resource Sarah had mentioned. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Patricia Morrison, a kind woman with gray hair and gentle eyes who specialized in trauma and family abuse. In our first session, she asked me to tell her about my family, and for the first time in my life, I told the truth. Not the sanitized version where I downplayed their cruelty or made excuses for their behavior, but the raw, ugly truth. Dr. Morrison listened without judgment, and when I finished, she said something that changed my life. "Amelia, you've been living in a fog of abuse for so long that you've normalized it. What your family did to you isn't just one incident of shaving your head. That was the culmination of years of systematic emotional abuse, financial exploitation, and manipulation. You've been conditioned to believe that your needs don't matter, that your feelings are invalid, that your only value is in what you can provide for others. We need to work on helping you see that you are worthy of respect, love, and autonomy just by virtue of existing." Those therapy sessions became my lifeline. Twice a week, Dr. Morrison helped me unpack years of toxic conditioning. I learned the difference between guilt and responsibility, between sacrifice and self-destruction. Most importantly, I learned that saying no wasn't selfish and that protecting my child wasn't abandonment. I had spent my whole life setting myself on fire to keep others warm. That wasn't love. That was abuse. Meanwhile, practical life continued. Maya helped me find a small apartment, a one-bedroom place in a neighborhood near Leo's school. It wasn't much, just a living room, kitchen, one bedroom, and a bathroom, but it was mine. I bought an air mattress for the bedroom and let Leo have it while I slept on the couch. I haunted thrift stores and garage sales, slowly furnishing our space with mismatched but functional pieces. Every night, Leo and I would eat dinner together at our small kitchen table, just the two of us, and the peace in that tiny apartment was worth more than all the luxury of my parents' house. But I was angry. Beneath the grief and the trauma and the slow process of healing, there was a molten core of rage that I couldn't ignore and honestly didn't want to. I had been wronged. I had been violated. I had spent years being treated as less than human by people who were supposed to love me, and now that I was free of them, now that I could see clearly, I was furious. That anger became fuel. I channeled it into my work with an intensity that surprised even me. I started coming in early and staying late, not because I had to, but because I wanted to prove something. I wanted to prove that I was valuable, that I was competent, that I was more than the family scapegoat they had made me believe I was. I volunteered for the difficult projects, the ones everyone else avoided. I stayed up late researching market trends and investment strategies. I became obsessed with excellence, with being undeniably good at what I did. And it paid off. 6 months after I left my family, I led a project that brought in a major client, a tech startup looking to go public that needed investment strategy consultation. I worked with a team to develop a comprehensive plan that was so solid, so well-researched, that the client signed with us exclusively. Sarah called me into her office again, but this time it was to tell me I was being promoted to senior analyst with a significant pay raise. I went home that night and cried, but this time they were good tears. I could afford a better apartment. I could buy Leo new clothes instead of thrift store finds. I could start saving money for the first time in years. I was building something and no one could take it away from me. I also started taking care of myself in ways I never had before. I joined a gym and started taking boxing classes. There was something incredibly cathartic about hitting a heavy bag, about channeling all that rage and pain into physical movement. I got stronger both mentally and physically. My therapist said I was literally fighting my way through my trauma and she wasn't wrong. My hair grew back slowly, and when it got to a certain length, I went to a real salon for the first time since the incident. The stylist, a woman with purple streaks in her hair and kind eyes, looked at my uneven growth and asked if I wanted to talk about it. I gave her the shortened version and she nodded thoughtfully. Then she said, "Let's give you something that makes you feel powerful." She cut my hair into a short, edgy pixie cut that was completely different from the long, plain style I'd had before. When she spun me around to face the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I looked strong. I looked fierce. I looked like someone who wouldn't let anyone push her around ever again. I loved it. Leo was adjusting too, though it was harder for him. He had nightmares about his grandparents for months. Dr. Morrison referred us to a child psychologist who specialized in trauma, and slowly, Leo started to heal. He made friends at school, friends whose families were actually functional. He started smiling more, laughing more. The tight, anxious expression he'd worn at my parents' house gradually faded, replaced by the carefree joy a 5-year-old should have. A year after I left, I was made director of investment strategy. I couldn't believe it. I had gone from barely making ends meet to leading an entire department in just 12 months. My salary tripled. I bought us a real apartment, a 2-bedroom with actual furniture that matched in a safe neighborhood with good schools. I decorated Leo's room with his favorite superhero theme. I hung art on the walls. I made a home, a real home, filled with peace and safety and love. During this entire time, my family kept trying to reach out. They created new email addresses, new phone numbers trying to get around my blocks. The messages evolved over time. At first, they were angry and demanding. Then they became pleading and manipulative, talking about how much they missed me, how family should forgive each other. Then they became accusatory, blaming me for Olivia's slow recovery, claiming that my abandonment was hurting her health. I ignored all of it. I had learned in therapy that I didn't owe them a response, that engaging would only give them power over me again. The only communication I had about them was through Maya, who sent them a cease and desist letter, informing them that any further contact would result in legal action. Then about 18 months after I left, something changed. My company went through a major merger with a larger investment firm that also owned several other businesses, including a media and entertainment division. It was a complex corporate restructuring, but what it meant for me was more responsibility and more influence. I was now overseeing investment strategy not just for our original firm, but for several subsidiaries, including their hiring and budget decisions. I didn't think much about it at first. I was focused on doing my job well, on managing the transition smoothly. But then about 6 months after the merger, I received an email that made my blood run cold and boil simultaneously. It was from HR forwarding me a resume for a senior position in the brand management department of our media division. The position reported ultimately to my division from a budget perspective, which meant I had significant input on the hire. The name on the resume was Olivia Richardson. I sat at my desk staring at that name for a long time. Then I opened the resume and read through it carefully. It was impressive, I had to admit. Olivia had leveraged her influencer status into a personal brand, had done some consulting work for small companies, and had a decent portfolio of social media campaigns. On paper, she was qualified for the position. But she was also the woman who had filmed my assault and threatened to post it online. She was part of the family that had tortured me, and now she wanted to work in a company where I had significant power. I called Maya immediately. "Is this legal? Can I refuse to hire her based on our history?" Maya Ever, the lawyer, talked me through it. "You can't discriminate based on familial relationship, but you can absolutely take into account any legitimate business concerns. If you have documented evidence of her threatening or harassing you, that's relevant. If you genuinely believe she's not the best candidate for the position, that's your professional judgment. Just document your reasoning clearly." I spent the next week doing the most thorough background check I've ever done on a candidate. I reviewed every aspect of Olivia's work history, her social media presence, her professional reputation. I also happened to discover that the video of my head being shaved was still on her phone's cloud backup, a fact that my new security consultant hired through the company's resources was able to verify. Olivia had kept it, presumably as leverage or entertainment. Armed with this information, and after consulting with both Maya and our HR department, I made my decision. I sent a detailed memo to the hiring committee explaining that while the candidate had some qualifications, there were significant concerns about professional judgment and potential workplace conflicts that made her unsuitable for the position. I didn't mention our relationship directly, but I provided enough professional reasoning that my recommendation was accepted. Olivia was not offered the position. But I knew this wouldn't be the end. My family had always been persistent, and they had always believed they were entitled to whatever they wanted from me. Sure enough, 2 days after Olivia would have received her rejection letter, I received a message through my work email from an address I didn't recognize. It was from my father. Amelia, it read, "We need to talk. Olivia is devastated by this rejection, and we know you had something to do with it. After everything our family has been through, after Olivia's battle with cancer, this is how you treat your sister. We're coming to your office tomorrow to discuss this in person. This has gone on long enough. It's time for you to remember your responsibilities to your family." I read the email 3 times, feeling that old familiar twist of anxiety in my stomach. Then I forwarded it to Maya and to building security with a clear message. Under no circumstances were Richard Carroll or Olivia Richardson to be allowed access to the building. If they showed up, security was to notify me immediately, but not engage with them. The next day they came. I was in my office on the 15th floor when I got the call from the front desk. "Miss Richardson, we have 3 individuals here claiming to be your family. They're demanding to see you. We've informed them they're not on the approved visitor list, but they're refusing to leave." I took a deep breath, straightened my blazer, and made a decision. Tell them I'll be down in 5 minutes. I used those 5 minutes to center myself. I called Maya and put her on standby. I texted Sarah to let her know what was happening. I reviewed the memo I had prepared for exactly this scenario. And then I walked to the elevator and rode it down to the lobby, my heart pounding but my resolve absolute. The elevator doors opened and there they were. My father in his expensive suit, looking older than I remembered, but still with that commanding presence. My mother in a designer dress and pearls, her face a mask of righteous indignation. And Olivia, her hair grown back into a chic bob, wearing clothes that probably cost more than my first car, her face a mixture of entitlement and rage. They started toward me the moment they saw me, but I held up a hand. "Stay where you are." My father's face reddened. "Amelia, this is ridiculous. We're your family." I looked at them, really looked at them, and I felt nothing. No fear, no guilt, no love, no hate. Just a cold, clear understanding of who they were and what they had done. "You're not my family," I said, my voice steady and loud enough that the receptionist and security guard could hear clearly. "Family doesn't assault each other. Family doesn't film that assault and threaten to use it as blackmail. Family doesn't exploit and abuse and traumatize." Olivia's face went pale. She knew I knew about the video. "You're being dramatic," she said, but her voice wavered. "It was just a family matter." I pulled out my phone and opened an email, turning the screen so they could see it. "This is a communication from my attorney, documenting your harassment, including the video evidence of assault and battery that you, Olivia, have retained on your cloud storage. That video, which you filmed and threatened to release, is evidence of a crime. I've chosen not to press charges, but that can change at any moment." My mother clutched her purse tighter. "You wouldn't do that. We're your parents." "You stopped being my parents the day you held me down and violated my body for a symbolic gesture," I said. "And let me be clear about why we're here today. Olivia applied for a position at a company where I have significant influence. She was rejected because she is genuinely not the most qualified candidate, and because any reasonable person would see a massive conflict of interest and potential liability in hiring someone with a documented history of threatening and harassing another executive. This isn't about family. This is about professional standards." Richard took a step forward and immediately 2 security guards moved to flank him. "You owe Olivia this opportunity," he growled. "After everything she's been through, after we took you in when you had nothing." I laughed and the sound was harsh even to my own ears. "You took 60% of my paycheck while I cooked and cleaned for you. You made me a servant in your house. You tortured me in front of my child. And when I finally escaped, I built a life you can't touch. I owe you nothing. Olivia owes herself a life, and that life won't be built on my back anymore." Carol's voice rose shrill and desperate. "You can't talk to us this way. We're your family." I looked at her, this woman who had held me down while her husband shaved my head, who had told my traumatized son that I was selfish, who had spent years making me feel worthless. "You gave birth to me," I said quietly. "That's a biological fact. But you were never my mother. A mother protects her child. A mother doesn't help in torturing her. You're strangers to me now, and that's how it will stay." I turned to the security guards. "Please escort these people out of the building. If they return, call the police for trespassing." I pulled a business card from my pocket and handed it to the receptionist. "This is my attorney's information. If they attempt to contact me or harass any employee of this company, all documentation will be forwarded to her. I locked eyes with each of them one last time. My father's face was purple with rage. My mother was crying, her carefully applied makeup running. Olivia looked shocked, as if she couldn't believe I was capable of this. Good, I thought. Let them see who I've become. Let them see that the doormat they created no longer exists. I watched as security walked them to the door, my father protesting loudly, my mother sobbing, Olivia looking back at me with something I couldn't quite identify. Hate, fear, respect, I didn't care. As the glass doors closed behind them, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I didn't even know I'd been carrying. I went back to my office, closed the door, and sat down at my desk. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from release, from power. From the absolute certainty that I had finally taken control of my own narrative. I sent Maya a text telling her it was done, that they had been removed, and that I was okay. Better than okay. That evening, I left work at exactly 5 p.m., something I'd started allowing myself to do now that I had proven my worth 1,000 times over. I picked Leo up from his after-school program and we went home to our apartment. As we walked in, Leo ran ahead to his room to play, and I stood in the doorway for a moment looking at the space we'd created. It wasn't fancy. We didn't have designer furniture or marble countertops. But it was ours. It was safe. It was filled with love and laughter and peace. I had done this. I had escaped, rebuilt, and thrived. I had protected my son from the toxicity I'd endured. I had created a life worth living. I looked at myself in the mirror by the door, at my short, stylish hair, at the confident woman looking back at me. For the first time in my life, I loved what I saw. Not because I was beautiful or successful or powerful, though I was all those things now, but because I was free, because I had chosen myself, because I had learned that I was worthy of love and respect, starting with my own. That night after Leo was asleep, I sat on my couch with a cup of tea and thought about everything that had happened. The pain, the trauma, the long road to healing, and finally today's confrontation. I thought about the woman I used, to be the one who believed her only value was in serving others, who thought love meant sacrifice without reciprocity. That woman was gone, transformed in the fire of trauma into someone stronger, someone who understood that self-love isn't selfish, it's survival. I also thought about my family, and for the first time I felt sorry for them. Not sorry enough to let them back into my life, but sorry that they would never understand what they'd lost. They had a daughter who would have loved them unconditionally if they'd just treated her with basic human decency. Instead, they had created an enemy of their own, making someone who would never again be manipulated or controlled. But mostly I thought about the future, about the life I was building for Leo and myself, about the career I'd fought for and earned, about the possibility of healthy relationships, of friendships, and maybe someday even romance with people who would see my worth. About growing old without the constant weight of abuse and expectation. I had survived. More than that, I had thrived, and that was a victory they could never take away from me. So here I am now, 3 years after that bathroom incident, and I'm not the same person. I'm stronger, wiser, and I've learned the hardest lesson of all: you can't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Family isn't just about blood, it's about respect, love, and mutual care. And when those elements aren't there, it's not family at all, it's just people who share DNA. I share my story not for sympathy, but as a testament to anyone out there who feels trapped in a toxic family dynamic. You can leave, you can rebuild, you can thrive. It won't be easy and it will hurt like hell, but on the other side of that pain is freedom. And freedom, I've learned, is worth everything. Your worth is not determined by how much you sacrifice for people who don't value you. Your worth is inherent, unconditional, and no one has the right to make you feel otherwise. If your family treats you as less than human, if they violate your boundaries and your body, if they make you feel worthless, then the problem isn't you, it's them, and you have every right to walk away. So, I ask you, have you ever had to choose between your family and your peace? Have you ever had to walk away from people who were supposed to love you in order to love yourself? Drop your story in the comments. Let's remind each other that we're not alone in this. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to put themselves first. Because sometimes saving yourself is the bravest thing you can do.